All right. So nice to see you, Minnie.
Good to see you, Kurt.
Oh, where are you today?
In Pasadena in my little laundry room office.
Oh, I love Pasadena. That's my family grew up there. That's one of the reasons why I was so excited to meet you and talk to you.
Pasadena has good people. I think that's a good thing. I mean, it's where I grew up. So I'm in the house I grew up in.
Oh my gosh, I have so many questions about that. My grandfather on my mom's side went to Marshall High School, and they got married in Highland Park in the 40s. And then my grandparents on my dad's side immigrated from Europe after the war and landed in Pasadena. And then my mom and dad met at Blair High School.
That's awesome. That's where my sister went. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of trippy being back. I sort of revert to being 13 years old in some ways because it definitely has all my old haunts here. So it's nice. I live with my parents.
Oh my gosh. Well, we're going to have to talk about that. So you and I met last month in June 2022, at an event I hosted at Crosscut co-founder Brian Garrett's house in Palisades. And I knew you from your podcast, but meeting you IRL in real life kind of was such a treat. And the last couple of years with COVID, there hasn't been many events. And meeting you kind of leapt off the screen or the tape, I guess, and your energy was just so positive and contagious. I just wanted to be friends with you.
Oh, that's so sweet. I mean, I've always had a lot of energy, Kurt. That's definitely, I'll take that.
And then I found out you surf, you're from Pasadena, and you have this incredible career in tech as an executive and operator, and now you're jamming with TenOneTen Ventures, which in my opinion is probably one of the most important venture capital firms in Southern California. So there's so much common ground I'm excited to explore.
Yeah, awesome.
So I'm so curious. You went to Poly, which is I think pretty for people that don't know, and it's one of the best high schools probably on the West Coast, if not in the United States, right?
It was fabulous for me. It's like everything that I learned actually in life, like most of the basics, the chemistry, the math, whatever. I probably peaked in high school. Yes.
That's funny.
Funny and sad, but true.
That I sort of feel like that too. Like I loved math, and then I forgot it all after high school. So what was one of the things that stuck with? Like, why is Poly so special?
Well, I think it was Poly. It was the community of Pasadena too. I had a pretty idyllic childhood, right? Like my dad's a professor at Caltech, and Poly used to be part of Caltech. They're across the street from each other. And I just, I rode my bike to school. I walked across the street to Caltech campus, ate the cookies on campus, played a lot of Little League and soccer. And, it didn't really feel like I was growing up in LA. Like it really felt like I was growing up in this sort of very supportive community of sort of nerdy. It was a very nerdy upbringing. My household, we called the commune for hardworking scientists. And we had a bunch of Caltech grad students always living with us. And I have 4 siblings. And we were just this sort of wacky, hippie, but sports playing, nerdy family. And so that was, and Poly appreciated that. Even at a time, I think before being kind of nerdy was cool, Poly was really focused on academic excellence. And I was able to sort of be competitive on that front. And it worked for me.
And it's short for Polytechnic, right?
Yeah.
What did your dad teach at Caltech, or is he still teaching?
It's sort of funny story there, but atmospheric planetary science.
Holy smokes!
It's it's great. He's 82, and we just had his retirement party. And I asked him, Dad, what do you want on a cake? Like, what do you have in your cake when you're retiring? He said, just put emeritus. So he's not really retiring. I live with him. He's still working hard.
Mm-hmm. What kind of math is involved in that?
All sorts of math that I don't totally understand. A lot of vorticity. He studies a lot of vorticity, which is modeling of atmospheres on other planets. The thing he talks about is he started this work when he was 20, and it still captures his imagination. And that's what he says.
So is that how you got bit by the engineering bug, was with your dad?
It was more that this is silly, but I like to be like the life of the party, as you say. Like I like to be in the room where it happens. I don't know how to describe it. I have a lot of energy and um I was pretty good at math and I went to Stanford
Yep.
and the math department wasn't like the life of the party, the room where it happens, so much as the computer science department. So that's really I got into it more because I saw that there was a lot going on there.
hmm Did you, when you were in high school, was Stanford always the target? Did you know you wanted to go there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was.
I mean,
But
that's an
now
interesting.
now that I'm a parent, I don't have that same feeling for my children at all. Like, it was a
Yeah.
different era and to each his own and all of that, but, my sister went to Stanford 7 years ahead of me, and, it seemed attainable or whatever. I don't know. Looking back, I'm, like, kind of sheepish, like, I feel like I was very much a full private school child, but Stanford was just so, um yeah, I mean, it had all the sports and it also had all the nerdiness I could want, so it's a good fit for me.
Yeah, that's amazing. What was one of the insights from school at college at Stanford that stuck with you?
Well, I mean, many things. So one is I did drop out pretty had this idyllic childhood up until Stanford, and I got to Stanford, had a really rocky first 2 years or so. Um, but but let's fast forward through the to the good stuff, which is so I graduated in 4 years despite dropping out a little bit. Um, and I graduated as a woman with a degree in computer science. And it really did help me sort of not feel like I was missing some secret handshake or something. And I think that a lot of people, it's one of my pet peeves is I meet people who are really smart people and who are working in technology for a decade and then they say, "Well, I'm not technical enough. I can't understand that API or that whatever." And I'm like, "An API, it's got inputs, it's got outputs, you can understand it." And I think that even though when I studied computer science first, I was studying Pascal before the internet existed. So we were writing computer programs that ran on computers like Microsoft Word on a computer, like a disk, right?
Yeah.
So even though what I actually learned in computer science is not at all relevant to today's world of the internet, um, it 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 allowed me not to have that fear that I was missing some secret handshake. And I think some people feel like, oh, I couldn't do something because they think that there was something that everyone else learned. Where in
Yeah.
fact, I didn't learn all that much. As I was saying, a lot of what I learned was really at Poly. But I think that's a huge win for me and something I needed to just have that confidence for the rest of my life.
Do you keep in touch with colleagues or classmates from high school or college much?
Yeah, interestingly, I kind of at Stanford, I ended up kind of having two groups of friends a bit. And one was all the people in the computer science department. And the other group was a bit of like, I got really into like, my beer pong, varsity beer pong or something. I don't know. And it turns out
Uh-huh.
that I actually have kept in better touch with the computer science folks. Like I keep running into them, they're still very much in my life. And then, yeah, of course, my high school friends are lifelong friends. I'm back in Pasadena. So,
Yeah. So I grew up in Ventura, about, 75 minutes from Pasadena. So we used to always go and visit my grandma. Love that drive. 101 to the 134.
mm-hmm.
And I went to UC Santa Barbara, and we live in Camarillo now. We were living in LA for a long time, but after COVID, my wife was like, "Hey, you miss kind of being home." So I'm like just hanging out, going surfing with my high school friends and see my college friends, and but still kind of have my career in LA. So I feel pretty blessed, and probably similar experience that you're having, kind of being back home.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
I mean, I have 3 little kids, so also just being home with my parents um it's been great to just have their example in the same house too.
Mhm. Yeah, how untraditional and unorthodox. It must be a massive house.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big house, it's a big, I mean, it's one of these big Pasadena houses. As I said, I had, 4 siblings, and we had a bunch of grad students living with us, but it's certainly not fancy.
Mhm.
It's just big.
Yeah,
And it's our
yeah.
family
Oh,
house. We've owned it 50 years, so it's important.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
What a great story. So from So you had a really long tenure at Google. I think you were there like 11 or 12 years, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like early employee, it was like sub 500
Yep.
headcount when you got there. What was how did you get recruited into Google?
Yeah, so Google, I my first startup that I joined IPO'd in March of 2000, and then the market tanked. And startups, everyone said, startups are gone, and I didn't know what I was going to do. My whole career has been, I don't know what I'm going to do, Kurt. Like I'm always, I don't know what I'm going to do. But so I decided to go to business school in 2000, and I went to HBS, Harvard Business School, and again I dropped out of HBS, or I more just like technically had trouble graduating. It was a little complicated. But it was interesting. A big thing for me again was like there was no secret handshake in business, and now it's the similar pet peeve when
Yeah.
one of my techie friends will be like, I couldn't create the business model. I need to go hire a business person to create the business model. I'm like, fundamentally, if you can do it, advanced calculus, you can open up an Excel spreadsheet and like drag the cells to the right and call that your business model. But it was a similar kind of thing for me, which is really useful for me to not feel like I was missing some, this is how to go run or start a business. And
It
I
was
think
sort of demystified.
yeah, yeah. And look, I can't, I still could never be an investment banker. I can't run, super complicated models, but I do early stage startup work. It's not that complicated, business
Sure.
wise. But I also I have a lot of respect actually for business school relative to a lot of people who are sort of business school haters. I think is kind of popular in the tech community. But business school was great for me in some ways, and then I struggled in some other ways. But I finished in 2002 and was pretty sure I really wanted to get back to tech, back to startups, and back to California. And
Yeah.
so that was how I found Google. It was one of the largest companies I looked at joining actually. And as you said, I was one of the first product managers there. It just felt like a good fit back to sort of more of the Stanford sort of roots.
Hmm. That's cool. So you got slotted into a product track. They probably celebrated your engineering chops at Stanford and your business chops at Harvard. So that was probably a nice way for you to kind of be the connective tissue between the engineering and the business units, right?
Yeah, and I had been a product manager before, and the product I got to work on was our billing system. I did that for a number of years. Starting a couple of years pre IPO, we were $1 billion company in 20-cent increments. And
Hmm.
so, because we were all based on little ad clicks, and what we had to do was close the books every month. But all the logs for everything were on logs of servers that were in Hong Kong and serving Chinese traffic, Japanese advertisers. And you had to get all those logs and put them into something that then billed the advertisers and could produce, invoices and close the books in 3 days. And that was, at the time we were emailing spreadsheets around. And that
Yeah.
was not, a Sarbanes-Oxley compliant thing. So yeah, it was not the sexiest product, but it was a good puzzle to solve.
Hmm. Is that where you first met Gil?
Yeah. So Gil Elbaugh is my partner at TenOneTen. His first company, he was Applied Semantics. It was AdSense, and he sold it to Google in 2003. And at the time, I thought I wanted to move to LA. And so he became the head of Google LA office. And I stayed in close touch with Gil and his brother Eitan. And I thought I wanted to move to LA. But at the time, Google was really still headquartered in Mountain View. And a lot of sort of the interesting product manager roles were still in Mountain View. And so it wasn't a bad thing. And all my network was in the Bay Area. So I stayed. But that's how I first met Gil and Eitan.
Yeah, yeah. My wife had a startup that Gil and Aton had invested in, and that's how. And I had met them independently of Holden. They're just such smart guys and so nice and humble too.
Yeah. I mean, amazing partners to have.
Yeah. What was one of the big insights about Google that has stuck with you to this day?
There were a lot. There were a lot. So, going straight from Google to running my own company, one of the things, different managers said different things. One was Patrick Pichette was the CFO at Google for a while towards the end. And he used to say, I want to find a way to get to yes.
Mm,
And it's so easy in management, world. to say no to ideas, especially ideas uh, that are coming from sort of bottoms up or some of the great ideas, but there's so many priorities and you do need to prioritize. But I liked that he started with I'm going to find a way to get to yes. And I like it as sort of a mantra to keep in mind, not just in business, but sort of in life. Another big one for me was to think for yourself and the power that one person can have in huge changes. And I luckily just feel like I got that front row seat to seeing um, Paul Bricault like invent Gmail. It just he decided there could be a faster, better, free email service than whatever we were using, AOL or Yahoo or something, and he built it and it became a thing. Or like Ev Williams is a great Ev built Blogger, and then he built Twitter, and then he built Medium. The guy just sees things so clearly, has a vision, and makes things happen. And I think being able to have that front row seat and saying, "Wow, you can put whatever you can do something. If you have that vision, you can make it happen." And so I use that a lot. Like women or whoever will come to me. I sit on panels and say, like, I want to break into VC, but it seems so hard. I'm not sure I can do it, or whatever their dream is. Meanwhile, Elon Musk is saying, I'm going to go land a spacecraft on an asteroid or something. And I'm like, look, if Elon can land a spacecraft on an asteroid, you can get a job in VC or whatever the thing is. And so
Mm.
just that power of watching people I didn't know I was going to become a VC at the time, but that has stuck with me, which is if you are so set in and like your heart is so into being able to solve some problem, like I really believe it is possible.
That's a really interesting insight. I worked for a billionaire for about 6 years at Esri, Jack Dangermond. He incredible guy, and he would tell me quite frequently that he had this idea about living above the line. People that listen to my podcast, this story keeps coming up because it's just it's a theme. And the above the line was context, and below the line was content.
Mm.
And he said that his in sort of like one of the secrets for his success is he would live above the line. He would define above the line as kind of what you just described, the imagination, the creativity, and that a lot of folks get trapped in the stimulus response function of below the line of the content, and that they just get trapped in that. Your insight was interesting about like being able to have a front row seat about that, but you also made a comment about somebody just sort of like getting lit up or emotionally charged. Do you have, in your experience, I wonder what the mechanism for somebody to have the thought or the imagination, be able to connect that into an emotion and to be able to like go make something happen.
Well, let me just riff on the above the line, below the line. Because I heard something recently that was the the easiest way to learn is through imitation. The most painful way to learn is through experience, and the most noble way to learn is through reflection. And
Love that.
one of the things that I feel like I got a lot of from Google was when I went to start my own company, Shift, I was I had been able to learn just by imitation, right?
Mm.
And so, I wonder if reflection is some of what allows people, for some people, to really get to have those moments of sort of being able to think for themselves, see their own path. Because that's been a big lesson of mine throughout my career is like the need to like lock yourself in a dark closet or something and just think for yourself and not listen to what your VCs are telling you or your
Mm.
manager or the systems are sort of trying
Yeah.
to push you towards.
Do you like even Jack Dangermond? I mean, he used to talk about this cabin up in Arrowhead that he would go to, and I think he'd do some of his thinking there.
Mhm.
Like, is there a pattern that you see from having that front row seat of people being able to find a window to reflect through? Is there anything that you see, or is it different for everybody?
I think it is different for everybody. So I'm not, despite having heard this and having it sort of resonate, I'm not good at it myself. I'm like a really good brute force, like learn through experience the hard way. And like, as I said, had some rocky ups and downs. But the other thing I do is I talk. I'm not it talk. It's like some people reflect in their head. Some people are writers. And I'm like I like to talk. And so, I'll come up with some
Yeah.
insight talking to people. And it's what I
Yeah.
got.
You and I are very similar to that. I tend to sometimes just like, shoot, point, aim kind of thing.
Yes.
Like whatever the sequence is, it's sort of backwards. And as I've gotten older, I do take more time to think and reflect, and I find that to be very efficient and highly leveraged time well spent.
Mm.
Um, yeah, the more I sort of meditate, the more things just sort of like kind of pull out of the sky.
That's
Um,
great. I need to pull some stuff out of the sky. I mean, I think some people have coaches. It's a similar like if you can't do it yourself, then like pay someone to hear you talk. And you'll get
yeah,
there.
yeah, and as I get older, more partly more responsibility. Also, just like try to. I don't think it's like I know like some of the best engineers they call them like they're like lazy, so they're trying to find the most efficient code or most elegant code to write. I think there's probably some insight there. But yeah, that's all great. I love that. Those are two awesome insights. Think for yourself and get to yes. I love the fact that the get to yes was from a CFO too.
Exactly.
Usually, yeah, that's great. What's he doing now?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't know. Someone
Mm,
told me the other day. I'll share one other that I don't know whether it was
yeah.
Patrick or someone else. But so at the beginning of Google, I worked really hard. Everyone worked really hard. And and I think that we talked some about burnout nowadays. And my lesson, which not doesn't work for everyone, but like I think that you can work extremely hard and people can really push themselves and not hit burnout when they're feeling that they're on a mission, when they're motivated and when they can see the results of their work happening. And I don't care whether you're working, 30 hours a week or 40 hours a week, you can work as few number of hours a week, but when your project gets canceled or you're making no progress or everyone's just fuffing about and discussing the meta stuff, that leads to burnout. That's my experience of it, which is it's not the hours I work, it's not, it's not number of hours put in, it's whether I feel like I'm motivated to do the work and seeing the results.
Yeah, yeah. I think I love that. Motivated and by momentum. It's the mo. You got to
Mm,
have the momentum. Otherwise, it feels like it's just a waste.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, love that. I mean, what a ride. I mean, I think, how long were you guys doubling headcount?
Oh yeah, we were
Like,
doubling headcount. For the first couple, I don't know how long it's possible to double headcount, but you go from 500 to 1,000 to 2,000 every sort of 6 months for a while. And so, that was the other thing that I learned was hiring and the importance of spending so much time on hiring and
mm,
how to do it well. I mean, I'm not a professional, but it was probably 30% of my time at Google for a while and 30% of my time at Shift was just on hiring. Um,
mhm,
Maybe that's a stretch, but it was a huge amount of time. And I was really poor at it at the beginning. And in fact, when I was at Google, I remember a review where they said, look, hiring was one of our number one things we got assessed on. Like it was really important. They kept emphasizing that. And they said, Minnie, you're really bad at it. And I was like, oh, didn't know that. But no one told me how to do better hiring until until a couple years in. And so just sort of learning how to write good interview feedback, how to do it in 48 hours and prioritize doing it in 24 or 48 hours, and actually doing all the prep work before doing hiring. Anyways, that was a lot. When I actually think about what functionally I've done the most of in my career, it has been interviewing and hiring.
yeah. Well, that gets into the world that I'm in with Hunt Club, and we do, talent search and thinking through that. That probably makes you a really good investor because you have to be able to really quickly be able to just X-ray into somebody's capability. Because most of the time at the stage you're investing so early, it's whether they can get it over the hurdle or not, right?
I mean, totally. It feels very similar, which is I'm having a 30-minute interview, and instead of asking you about your product management, I'm asking about your sort of ability to launch a company. But it
Mhm.
has a lot of same characteristics.
Yeah. I think some of my colleagues at Hunt Club would be really interested to listen a little bit like around any insights at Google with the hiring that I mean, you mentioned like fast feedback. Like, what was it? What transitioned you to become a good hiring manager? What?
Probably, as a hiring manager, maybe even more outside of Google, like the really the work up front, the work and the alignment up front makes all the difference, I think, to running a good interview panel, I guess, process. And so, really understanding what does success look like in 18 months? What are the key
Mhm.
sort of characteristics that will get us there? And then knowing sort of who's probing on those sorts of things. I mean, I know it's all standard stuff, but I think sometimes we were not aligned on what are the key characteristics we're really looking for. And you can't have a list of 10 because you need to have a list of like four at most, three or four,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
really say, okay, given all of that, what are the profiles that are going to fit here, and all of that is upfront stuff more than it is actually in the interview. And then I asked the same question to 500 product managers, let's say, um, and then you just get better at stack ranking.
yeah. I remember that's great. So stack ranking. Talk to what does that look like?
Well, let's say that your question is a technical-ish question like, tell me about what happens when I send you, Kurt, an email. What happens in my computers, servers, whatever, layer you want to talk about. And some people can go through, any layer of application, protocol, whatever you want. And some people are, don't have as much depth. It's not, if you're looking for someone and you care about that characteristic, and then you can just say, well, clearly here's the 10% of people who answer that question much better than the other 90%.
Got it. So you're basically waiting, trying to understand sort of the vector of their experience and knowledge, and becoming stack ranking, kind of the essentially the core functional requirements, and you're testing for those, right?
Well, in that question, sure. Although, a lot of that is also communication. So it's, but it depends what you're looking for. If you want someone who's
Yeah.
a really technical product manager, you might care about the technical aspect. If you care about someone who can explain things clearly, then you might value that. I mean, again, it does depend on what you've decided you're looking for. And then, my boss at the time would ask you, I'd ask some question about something technical. And my boss would then ask, you're in a boat with five people and it gets a leak and it can only hold four people. What do you do? So, like, we had different questions.
You're like, I'm definitely gonna save you.
Yeah, right. But some people would say that, and some people would be like, I'm going to push you out of the boat because, you know,
Oh my gosh, that's funny.
you learn.
Well, shifting gears, all the pun intended.
Bum, bum.
Cheesy dad jokes. You had so you had a great run, decade plus as an executive at Google, and then you went out and co-founded a company as an operator, Shift Technologies, that had a explosive growth. You guys ended up IPOing the company, right?
We spacked it.
Okay, awesome. What was sort of that transition, and then what sort of something you're really proud of or grateful for around your 5 years at Shift?
Yeah. So the transition. So I went on maternity leave from Google and thought I'd take 6 months off, and uh, it turns out that I got
You had
itchy.
two babies.
What's that?
You had two babies.
Yes, Shift and my baby. Yes, yes. Seemed like a
That's
perfect
amazing.
time to start a company when you've got a newborn at home. So that was kind of the start of it. Was my co-founder was also at Google, and he actually was the one with this passion around the used car space, and I. I really started working with him when I was on maternity leave. I wrote him his first angel check, and um, just the passion for building a company. Like some of it was exciting to build something that people cared about and needed in their lives. But honestly, like a lot of it was just getting so excited to build a company, and like, I could write a little wireframe and then I could launch the website 3 weeks later with our outsourced development team overseas in a way that wasn't possible at Google anymore, right? That
Yeah,
speed of just building something
yeah.
and actually seeing it out in the wild. And then I had a website, and then I had customers, and we were, parking cars in front of George's house, and because we were buying and selling used cars, and we'd buy them, and then street cleaning came, and we had to move the cars around, and then we got our first warehouse, and it was full of pigeons. They shat on our cars, and like whatever, like just all that exciting like problems to solve, and like just being able to build something
Like a
yourself.
real life, like a video game come to life, right? And you just got all these little things you got to go solve, and you just keep leveling up.
Yeah, and like hiring people and having then having real responsibility, but just like it kept leveling up, and we kept building something that people kept wanting.
Hmm.
And all of the aspects of like almost like what you'd think you'd learn in business school, all of a sudden I had to learn all of it. Because all of a sudden, like the marketing team reported to me, and I'd never run growth marketing initiatives in my life. And then
Yeah,
the HR team reported to me, and oh my gosh, I'd certainly never done that. And then fill in the blank, all these things that I had never done before, and I all of a sudden drank from the fire hose and had to learn all those things. So that was
yeah.
amazing.
And I'm assuming engineering and product rolled up to you too.
Not engineering. We had a CTO, and
Yeah.
some of product for operations rolled into me.
Okay. So you were COO and co-founder,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Interesting. How is that having so product rolled up to you, but engineering did not? How did that? Was that? It sounds like that worked pretty well. It was functional for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think like anything, there's a lot of where the baton handoffs are. Uh,
Yeah.
Interestingly, in our org, one of the areas we struggled some with was almost like it being a marketplace, and having the the people who acquired the cars were often sort of different than the people who were selling the cars, and that was a big tricky handoff there, because it's always easy to point fingers and say like, oh, I'm not selling the cars because we had crap cars, or we paid too high a price, or that sort of thing. Um, and one of my friends talks about, actually on my podcast, Omar Hamui talks about what's your first team and what's your second team. And the fact that a lot of people think that their first team is, I'm a salesperson, my loyalty is to the sales team. And my second team might be, I'm part of the executive team. I'm the VP of sales, I'm part of the executive team. And actually, you need to flip this around and say, my first team is, to the broader organization.
Yeah.
And otherwise, everyone comes, and I'm the COO, and I'm fighting for my operational resources. But, the CTO is saying like he's coming and representing engineering and what their capacity is, and we're all coming and sort of fighting for our own org, as opposed to really taking the first team needs to be the bigger team that you're a piece of.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I sort of think that that kind of mindset it would be really beneficial to our society at large. I think a lot of people identify as like their religion, and then maybe like as an American, and then a human. But if you were to be like, I'm a human, I'm an American, and then I'm, whatever, and then things would work a lot smoother. That's a really subtle shift. That's really powerful.
Yeah,
Because you're serving the greater good, and you're having more empathy, and probably it's a much more functional, workable philosophy.
I love taking it to the life level where, yeah, I'm part of this world. There is energy. There are
Yeah.
trees that have energy. Yeah.
So, what's one of the things that you're really proud of or grateful for that you guys were able to achieve at Shift?
I mean, they're different things. When you asked it before, I thought you were saying like what I went through a lot of personal growth, and just learning how to mostly manage people, but like just work with people is a better way of sort of saying that. Which I think maybe it's because I'm a VC now, you sort of miss it. It's a big change, right? I miss it in some ways. I love it in other ways. I love that I don't have all the people complications, because I think that you go through so much personal growth just working with people and trying to make an organization full of people work together. And then as a VC, I feel like you get so much intellectual growth, but not as much personal growth. And
Yeah,
in a lot of ways, I'd say personal growth is amazing, because I think it has made me a better mother, daughter, spouse, etc. But personal growth, usually if it's learned through experience, I think it's often quite painful, because you learn that you're not the best communicator you thought you were, that sort of thing.
yeah, yeah. It reveals their flaws. Yeah, I really believe that, and that's part of what I'm doing with the show, is that entrepreneurship and creating business is a very powerful mechanism for self actualization,
Mm,
because you sort of have to live and die by the results that you generate,
mm,
and a lot of it has to do with our own ability to be in reality or communicate or get people to create cohesion,
mm.
all of that stuff. So
It's
that's
interesting.
amazing.
Even making a podcast, I feel like has made me learn more about what questions to ask and how to listen
Yeah.
better. It's interesting.
Oh my gosh. Like I listened back, like I've gotten a lot better, but like some of the early podcasts I did, I was like, man, I like wasn't really actively listening. There'd be like whole sections where the guest was saying stuff and I don't remember him saying that. So I've gotten a lot better, or like, yeah, well, that's wonderful. And by the way, for the audience, Minnie's podcast is awesome. If you're interested in all things sort of LA, Southern California tech investors, it's sort of a credible survey of who's in the market. And it's always amazing how big this market is. It's remarkable how many. It's like an iceberg. There's so much under the surface here.
Mhm, mhm. No, I mean, when I started, I do it weekly, and I've been doing it for 3 years, so I've got about 160 episodes published, and I've got another 100 VCs, and I'm mostly just doing partners in Southern California venture funds, and people keep saying, "You're gonna run out," but the truth is actually, the longer I've been doing it, the longer the pipeline has gotten.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, maybe that's a great transition um, into 10110. I do. I know we have the Code for America stuff that we have in common too, that I wanted to talk about, but the 10110, catch us up on sort of the thesis. How'd you get involved, and what are the check sizes, and kind of what's your day to day look like these days as a VC?
Yeah. So the way we talk about it is we really want to build an institution to serve technical founders because that's what we all were and are. And that's, I guess, were. And that's what resonates with us. I think it sort of resonates in both directions with David Waxman, my partner. He said, "Oh, yeah, I had to go down to Menlo Park and go talk nerd to someone." And I was like, "That's right, David. Yeah, you did. You had to go talk some nerd." um, but we care about fundamentally. I care about people as a starting point, and so I really like the idea of sort of framing it around the people that we're working with more than anything. But more tactically, we are usually leading someone's seed round, and usually it is a reasonably technical company. I say reasonably because David Gill and I sort of gravitate towards different sorts of tech, and we have a new partner, Eric, as well, and we all have different things that get us most excited. But usually there is some sort of technology moat or some heavy piece of software being built. But I do a lot of things like vertical SaaS that are not like it's not frontier tech, right? It's just let's take some automation and apply it to some of these big legacy industries usually that still have not like been brought into the future. So, um, or been brought into the to present day, which is a lot of, to your point about Code for America, it's a lot of that, like helping government get up to speed technically. But so things like healthcare, like huge need in our country to solve some of these massive industries. And when you think down into the future, are doctors all still going to be memorizing textbooks for 4 years in med school, or are they actually going to have computer assistants to more accurately, help them diagnose and remember the correct, medications, things
Mm-hmm.
that's not even super future thinking. It's just, we need to solve a lot of these challenges to help our society um, get where it needs to get in terms of just solving basic needs of the humans and the planet. And so, um, and I don't really think a lot of these industries are going to reinvent themselves. I think that entrepreneurship is really one of the bright spots of our country. So it's a great role. Writing the
Yeah,
$1 million check, something like that, leading seed rounds, giving someone their first. Usually, it's like someone raising $2 to $4 million.
got it. So early stage technical founders doing something with high gross margin software. Um, Yeah, love it.
And
That's
a lot of emphasis on Southern California because we're all here and it's, it's a great community.
yeah. I've heard it said that San Francisco was the utopia gone wrong, and Los Angeles was the dystopia gone right.
That's hilarious. I okay, go on.
I mean, I don't know. I love LA. I think it's an interesting market because you know it's pretty open. There's just so many dimensions to it, and you have the storytelling aspect with Hollywood, and I mean, deep tech started here back in the day.
I
You know,
I just had on my podcast, I had Brett Brewer on, and he's like, about as OG as they get in terms of the LA ecosystem. And
yeah, basically, MySpace. He owned MySpace, sold it to Murdoch. Yeah,
yeah, yeah, and he talks about owning MySpace, and I do believe that the culture of startups is really set by the early employees. Once you've got 10 people, you've got some culture, and I think the same is true of cities. And I think that LA also was built by people who it's a different culture than San Francisco, and I find it a very warm, welcoming culture. So I feel like we have a lot
yeah,
of thanks to be paid to people who were here early.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So so how long have you been at 10110 now, Minnie?
3 years.
What's sort of a founder or a deal that you've backed that you're really kind of excited or proud of right now?
Um, I just had a founder show up at my house to go for a walk this morning, so I'll talk about Selfbook. Um, Selfbook is, I mean, on the surface, it's software for hotels. So okay, so it doesn't sound like wildly exciting on the face of it, but it's exactly the sort of software we like, right? Which is, it's hotels run on really old legacy software that has made it very hard to innovate. So if you ever go to a hotel, you'll notice it's hard to like reserve a hotel room with Apple Pay, Google Pay, Affirm, any of like the modern wallets because the integration with the backend systems is so hard to do. So this company Selfbook has figured out they started as building the websites for hotels, but now they do all the payments and they can integrate modern wallets. But some of what's amazing is like the team, they were immigrants from Morocco. Khalid, the fellow who I was walking with, when he moved here, he wasn't legal. So he ended up being homeless for a while, sleeping in Central Park in New York. And he taught himself to code websites at the Apple store when the first Apple store opened. And he was
Wow.
able to use the computers in the Apple store to start building websites that allowed him to then build up this agency work where he was building websites for high end luxury hotels and other places. And like, his story is amazing, and so he just raised a large round of capital and was able to sell a couple $1,000,000. Not crazy, but just sell a couple $1,000,000. Um, and those sorts of stories of just like entrepreneurship are incredibly inspiring. I find that like distance traveled stories so inspiring, I am eager to see what he does next with his life. He's still a young person.
Oh, I just got the chills and warm fuzzies. What a great story.
Yeah,
Yeah. We immigrants, that's where it's at,
yeah,
that immigrant mindset, it's epic. Well, I think that maybe that's a really great uh, place to turn the page. One of the core themes of the show, Minnie, is humanizing success. And I don't know if I've shared some of the challenges. We're sort of new friends. I've personally had some pretty, things I've dealt with in my life. I helped my dad get sober when I was in college. And he's now just a beacon of light in our community. He's been sober 2 decades now. That's just kind of been great for our family. And there's some other stuff. I was born without ear canals. And in 2007, at the House Ear Clinic in downtown LA, they gave me the gift of hearing. And so I have this, I'm like a full on cyborg. I
mm,
have this little Baja bone anchored hearing aid that clips in. And I sort of tease that I'm a born again technologist and that technology's given me a new life. So I get to sort of pay it forward.
yeah.
Um, So I guess I do believe that the bigger the breakdown, the bigger the possibility for the breakthrough. I've experienced that to be true in my life. And having said that, what's a challenge personally or professionally that you faced that you're comfortable sharing, and how'd you get over the hurdle, and what gift did the pain give you?
Yeah, I mean, the challenge, I feel like I'm still on the same roller coaster that I've been on. Um, so some is still like work in progress, Kurt, work in progress.
We
I
all are.
oh my gosh, it just doesn't. I'm actually 10 years sober myself, and that's been part of my journey for sure. Was needing to get sober 10 years ago. Um, but that's part of this same journey that really started it for me sort of in college was my first real breakdown, I would say.
Hmm.
And in college, as I said, like I sort of had this lovely idyllic, like played a lot of sports, was pretty nerdy, but not too nerdy in high school. And I got into Stanford and I was like, it was my dream. I'd wanted to go to Stanford. And I got there and really my freshman year, I walked on to the softball team and I got all this good stuff going, and I lost a lot of weight, because I wanted to be skinny, like, everyone there was, like, really skinny and good looking, and then my start of my sophomore year, but it was kind of unhealthy, like, I was really and I now would sort of say I'm a little manic, I have a little bit of a manic tendency in my manic depressiveness, but so then my sophomore year, I crashed and was completely depressed, and so I went from being
Oh,
kinda manic to being just fully suicidally inclined, um,
mm,
and at the time I probably gained 50 pounds or something, maybe 60, like I just and so a lot of people just thought it was an eating disorder because I lost 40 pounds, I gained 60 pounds, like it was like that was very visible. But I
sure.
actually, to my point about it being more than like an eating disorder. I was gonna say like a simple eating disorder, but like nothing simple about it. But like it was actually some of this sort of like almost like learning myself, my emotions, like what I can like as I said, I quit drinking because also drinking was one of those things that puts me higher and lower. And I'm not
Yeah,
able to go too much higher and lower because I already tend to drift a little too high. And like, just being completely sober, like there are times where I think I can fly. And then I realize that it's like come back down to earth sort of thing. And so, so it's still a journey. It's still a journey. But what I could really say about like, I'll just, and a similar thing happened to me then in Boston in business school, as I sort of alluded to, was the seasons were too hard for me, which is sort of ridiculous, but like, um, uh,
sure. I spent some time in Canada. It was really tough. Yeah, like being from SoCal, you get used to like just 72 and sunny all the time.
yeah, yeah. Um, and and so learning so okay, so sophomore year, I gained 60 pounds. I just every morning I did not want to get out of bed, right? Like and I just always it was just sort of it got worse in terms of just always hoping that a truck would hit me, like always hoping like no one would ever see me. And I moved out of the
Oh,
dorms to live by myself for a while and finally like I was just trying really hard never to see people. I just felt horrible about myself, right? And and finally my family sort of said, "You're not doing well," and I knew I wasn't doing well, and, so I moved back home to this house again, which is like my safe space, and I dropped out of Stanford, and I figured I would probably go to City College, and I really felt like it was a real giving up on a dream. Like I'd always wanted to not only go to college, I'd always wanted to go to Stanford and I dropped out. Um and I was suicidal, but I wasn't it was just more like just wanted to paint the walls black and not see the world. Um
sure.
anyways, like many good things came out of it. And one was, I hear people talk a lot about like learning to pick yourself back up. And that was not my experience really. Like mostly for me, I needed some help. And so some of it was I wasn't comfortable. I was really embarrassed because a lot of the way it manifested was eating disorder. And like I have a
Hmm.
lot of sympathy for people who have cancer and are struggling because they have a disease. And I did not have a lot of sympathy for myself because it seemed like a very self-inflicted wound. Um it seemed like eating like and it wasn't just eating disorders, it was like there was a lot more going on there, but, like, that was I didn't have any sympathy for what I was going through, and it needed my mother in particular to actually have sympathy, get me on Prozac, which was like the only antidepressant at the time. But it's something about like being on Prozac, deciding to go to City College, and then being able to just get out of bed then because I wasn't able to like get out of bed and like go into the sunshine and like go on a run or like go on a walk even. But I think, probably more than anything, I think the Prozac actually probably just helped me get out of bed and start sort of seeing the
Yeah.
world again. And then once I was like out in the world and going on a jog and like all of that, gosh, it turns out like I felt better. And honestly, I went back to Stanford um, a semester later, 6 months later. I can't quite remember now. But then they call it stopping out. It wasn't dropping out, it was stopping out. And like my life was not over, right? And like no one's any the wiser. Like it's never I graduated in 4 years with a degree in computer science. Unless you had asked, no one's the wiser and yet at the time I thought my whole life was over. And I did not
Yeah.
see any light at the end of the tunnel. And like probably the biggest lesson for me, you asked what's the lesson? Um is like sometimes you just have to get through things. And like sometimes you have no idea, but like you kind of just, and that's a sad reflection on life. I think there are many positive things in life, but there are times where it is just you just have to get through it. And we sometimes in our family say like chop wood, carry water. Um,
Yes.
it's, and you don't have to enjoy it. Like, I love life now, but at the time I didn't see that I was ever going to enjoy life. Um,
Yeah.
so that's my biggest thing is there are times you just have to get through and then my God, I love my life right now. And I wish I could have known that and seen that there would be positive things. I have 3 kids who are amazing. All of that stuff, like all of those, you know, promises do come true sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you being so candid. And after at college, when I helped my dad get sober, I went through a depression as well, and I got some help, and it really helped me out. And my first episode of my podcast was with my dad, and we kind of celebrated his journey, and that was one of the insights that he had. It was very similar: is you never know what life is going to bring,
Mm,
like. And you just got to keep going. And part of the theme that I keep hearing when I'm talking to people is that it's all hard. Like it's hard to get rich, it's hard to be poor, it's hard to get healthy, it's hard to be sick.
yeah.
So like we get to choose wisely, and we feel better about ourselves when we do the things that are, it's sort of like you could have hard now, it's like hard now, easy later, or you could have easy now or hard later,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And so kudos to you for pushing through. And I think just really emblematic of what I'm trying to highlight with the show is that, like, awesome people like you, it's not a linear path. It's a lot of like kind of tacking into some choppy water
Mm, mm,
to get to the other side.
yeah. Yeah.
So kudos.
Thank you. No, it's again, like it's one of those it feels now things are far less daunting because I've gone through some dark stuff a few
Yeah.
times now and come out the other side.
Yeah. I know we're at time. I did have a couple of rapid fire questions, but if you got to jump, we can press pause now. But I wanted to be mindful.
No, as long as they're, easy questions, go for it.
Easy. So thanks again, Minnie, for sharing that very personal and awesome story. Really appreciate it, and I know our audience will too. Couple of rapid fire questions, make it fun. Best boss you ever had?
Um, Larry Alder. I love my partners, Gil and David too. Just like unconditional, I was gonna say unconditional love, but unconditional love and support.
Yeah, love that. If you could magically have any band or artist or rapper play any venue, past, present, future, who would it be and where?
First thing that came to mind was like I missed the first Coachella. And it was like, God, I don't remember. It was Beck. It was such a good lineup. And I had just moved to New York and like I didn't make it back. So maybe they could like do it like a do a redo for me. Um,
I love it.
but honestly, just dancing in my backyard. We have a band that we bring into the backyard and dancing with my parents in the backyard, probably even more than Coachella.
I love that. That's amazing. Um, how could our audience be helpful to you? And if people wanted to connect online, what's a good channel to engage?
I'm feeling feeling so bucket full right now. I like
Mm,
I feel like I feel like I don't need anything right now, but like I love being part of the LA ecosystem. It's been so
mm,
welcoming. So if I can help pay that forward, I try to I read my LinkedIn. Um people can email me Minnie at 10110.net, but I
yeah.
also read my LinkedIn.
Mhm. I know you're pretty active in like public sector stuff. It's one of the things that we didn't really get into, but is there any sort of nonprofit-y or like kind of more public good stuff that you're involved in that people might be able to help you with?
I do believe that sort of what is it? Charity starts at home. And that's not quite right, but like
Mhm.
I do like helping my local community. I feel like as you said, I got involved with some government stuff, but I actually even think like the city level, I've become, it's not the federal level, it's not the
Yeah,
state level, it's the city level, or even just, the local Innovate Pasadena chapter. Um, so I do think that it's important to have some overlap between government and tech in particular.
yeah, I would agree with that. Awesome. Well, Minnie, it was so nice to be able to spend some time with you. I sort of feel like I got to make a new friend, and I'm just so grateful that you spent some time with us today and that you're in LA. And I'm really excited to see what you guys do next. And I hope you have an awesome vacation to Europe.
Thanks so much. Kurt, I know. I hope I get to see you around much more in the LA ecosystem. I bet we
Yeah,
will.
let's do that Pasadena event.
Excellent. Love it.
So have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too.